I'll give one more warning now that this video will contain some spoilers for his Dark Materials. Not many, but I won't be able to cover all the points I want to without discussing a few. So if you haven't read the books and you want to go into them without knowing as little as possible, then just stop the video now, come back after you've at least read all of Northern Lights or The Golden Compass, whichever title you find it under. So now that the noobs are gone, at least the ones that care about this kind of thing, the first thing I want to discuss is that, like I said last time, the first and now only His Dark Materials movie ends before the book does. However, this was not always the case, and originally the ending of the book was filmed, but they decided that it was too much of a downer, so they moved it to the beginning of the second movie. At least that was the plan. And I just cannot see any way that this could work. Now, by the end of Northern Lights, Lyra has rescued all the kids that were kidnapped, at least the ones that survived, and she has helped Yorick Burnison get back his rightful place as ruler of the Panzerbjorgen, or the Armored Bears. But her one primary goal from the beginning was to save the life of her friend Roger, and at this she fails. I won't say exactly how Roger dies, but even beyond that death itself, it is just a complete punch in the gut to the reader and makes you reevaluate everything that you've seen so far in the story. It also opens the door to literally anything being able to happen in books 2 and 3, so it's pretty exciting as well. Now, especially that you know how far Pullman is willing to go in just what he's willing to screw with audience perceptions. And in book number 2, before that, I just absolutely do not see that ending working as the beginning of a story. You can't throw that kind of emotional gut punch into the beginning of a story and then expect us to just settle back down and wait until the next one. And the ending to The Subtle Knife is quite a shock on its own, but not quite as big as the one that ends Northern Lights, at least in my opinion. You need to give us time between movies to absorb what happened, just like Pullman himself did with the books. I mean, I read them all in one go, but still I needed some time off between reading, finishing Northern Lights and starting The Subtle Knife. I needed a few hours to really just think about the whole implications of what I just read. And I should note that I don't blame Chris Weitz for much of this. I had my doubts about him going in because his biggest movie until that point, and actually still, is American Pie. But from all the interviews I've read, he seemed like a really big fan of the books who really wanted to give us a faithful adaptation and a good adaptation, and the studio just stymied him at every turn, wanting to turn this into the big fantasy tentpole franchise like Harry Potter or The Lord of the Rings. So, kudos to you, Chris. Hope this doesn't affect your career too badly in the future, even though, let's face it, he's done nothing much since. Moving on, The Subtle Knife introduces a character named Will Perry, who joins up with Lyra, and he is from our world, which is a parallel universe to Lyra's world. They meet somewhere in the middle, and yet another world. I won't reveal any more details than that, but trust me, it's worth it. And after The Golden Compass was released as a movie, the big speculation, back when we still thought that there was some chance The Subtle Knife would be made, is that Roger would not only survive, but take over Will's role. And given how safe they'd made the story already, I have no problem believing that. And in fact, I also highly doubt they would have kept the scene in which Will loses 2 of his fingers, despite that being a very important part of his character development, as you would imagine. So, besides that, The Subtle Knife also features a big increase in the character that Christopher Lee played in Northern Lights, which I've covered before, so let's move on from that. Um, the Amber Spyglass, book number 3, is the one I think that has the biggest flaws of the series. It introduces a few important characters that we have not seen before, which is not a very good idea if it's the last part of a trilogy. Like, I imagine Matthew and Stan are the types who would have some big problems with that. For myself, I do have kind of a problem looking back at it now, but at the time I was reading, I was just so swept up in what was going on that I didn't really care, and that's really the best thing you can hope for in a story like this. So, another thing about the Amber Spyglass is it contains a chapter called Vodka that comes completely out of nowhere and has no impact on anything else and is vaguely disturbing because it involves giving alcohol to a minor, albeit in Russia where I guess that kind of thing is more accepted. But still, I have no idea why Pullman threw that in, and I just prefer to skip over it if I ever do reread the books, because they are great books, and I like the chance to just read them now, knowing the whole story and seeing all the clues set up. I find that kind of fun to do all the time. And Mrs. Coulter also becomes a much more well-rounded character in the Amber Spyglass especially. She isn't present for much of the Subtle Knife, or really any of it if I can recall correctly. But in the Amber Spyglass, you get a nice glimpse into her personality and see that she really does care about Lyra in her own way as her daughter, but she's just so psychologically screwed up herself that she can't express it properly. And I was pretty surprised at how sympathetic it made me toward her considering what she's done before. In fact, the whole series is full of people who do bad things for good reasons, and you're forced to ask yourself who is actually in the right here, and it's undeniable that if they hadn't done some of the things they did, all of the universes that exist would have been completely screwed. One more thing I do have to discuss that I hinted at once before is that God, as a character, doesn't come under that much heavy fire in this story. When he does appear near the end, he is presented as someone whose time has passed and who needs to step down, but he is well-meaning and not evil at all, which is more than I was expecting given how much I'd heard about how the series is this huge screed against the church. So I found a lot to like about the series. I know Matthew didn't. I'll respect his wishes and not ask why, but I do encourage people to at least pick up the first book and decide for themselves, because this movie, The Golden Compass, was not a good adaptation at all. Please do not judge the book series by it. Hopefully I'll have gotten some people interested in reading it. I do believe it's worth reading, even if you don't like it, because it's got some interesting ideas to it. And see you next time in another video, which I have an idea of already, but I won't spoil what it is here. It involves another fantasy series, that's all I'll say. Thank you all. Hope you take my advice for whatever it's worth. See you next time.